Welcome to Illuminating Catholics, podcast of the Diocese of Sioux City. I'm Dawn Prosser, Director of Communications for the Diocese. Together with Carmen Bauer of the Faith Formation Office, we will shed light upon topics of faith in the modern church. Our guests include Catholic clergy, religious sisters, and other experts in their fields to help us understand what's happening in the church today. We will explore issues, even the tough ones, and to find answers to common questions about Catholicism. Thank you for joining us for today's Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church. Welcome back to the Illuminating Catholics podcast of the Diocese of Sioux City. We're thrilled that you're listening and learning more about current topics of the faith through our podcast. Be sure and tell all your friends and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Today we're excited all the way from Des Moines. We're welcoming Tom Chapman, the Executive Director of the Iowa Catholic Conference. He's going to explain to us what that conference is and how it serves our bishop, all our bishops actually, and Catholics throughout the state. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, it's so great to have you join us, Tom. You do a lot of the work that not a lot of people see, so it's great, to be able to introduce our listeners to that and your important work in the church. But before we get into, what you do, we'd love just to learn more about you. Where are you from? What is your educational background?
Oh, sure. Actually, I grew up in Northwest Iowa. I grew up in Spirit Lake, Iowa. Went to the school there, public school, and then ended up at Briar Cliff College, now Briar Cliff University, and graduated there with a degree in communications and worked for several years in Sioux City and Lamar's before, we came down to Des Moines probably 35 years ago or so. But basically, I really enjoyed working in Sioux City and getting a start to my career that way.
I did not know that until this very moment that you are from Spirit Lake.
Yes, yeah. And actually, interestingly, the person who's the executive director of Pulse Life Advocates of Iowa actually grew up in Spirit Lake as well.
Maggie?
I graduated. Yeah, Maggie. Yep, Maggie's from Spirit Lake. She's much younger than I am, but I graduated with her brother, actually, at Spirit Lake. So
see, you learn something new every day.
Right? Yeah, there was something about the town, maybe. I don't know.
Must be. Produces some great people that work for the church.
Absolutely.
Well, you're pretty blessed to have your roots up here in this diocese, with so many great towns and the communities that you had mentioned. So how did you come to your current position, your work that you do with the Iowa Catholic Conference, and how long have you been serving there?
Sure. Well, I actually started out, as I said, in Sioux City, working at a TV station and then at the Mercy Hospital. And then my wife, Paulette, got a job here at one of the parishes in West Des Moines. And so I figured, I better go along with her. So
Yes.
We moved down here in 1990, and I started working for the Diocese of Des Moines in 1990 as their communications director. So I did that for, it was about 12 years or so. And then I served as chancellor of the diocese. Effectively, in the Diocese of Des Moines at that time, it was chief of staff for the bishop. So I did that work for 4 or 5 years for Bishop Sharon. And then the position at the Iowa Catholic Conference came open. And I had been on some of the conference's committees, over that time. And so I was kind of a known quantity. So I applied for that and started working for the Iowa Catholic Conference in 2007. So right now I just started in my 19th session at the state capitol.
Wow. Time flies when you're having a great time.
Oh my gosh, it's gone so fast.
It does seem
Very
like
true.
You've been around a while with the conference.
Yeah, I'm kind of a known quantity, I'm afraid.
Yes, you are. So it did take me a while. I've worked for the church for a long time in different capacities, but it did take me a while to figure out what the Iowa Catholic Conference was.
Yes.
So even if you work for the church, you might need this information. So can you just explain for the listeners, what is the Iowa Catholic Conference and the purpose of it?
Yeah, well, our organization has been around since the mid-1960s, and it's not very well known among Catholics, but it's really the collaboration of the 4 bishops of Iowa on their public policy and advocacy work. So I really serve as the lobbyist for the Catholic bishops of Iowa at the state capitol. So I watch legislation. I'm at the Capitol every day during session and do, just basically work on what I would say the respect life positions of the church, social justice, and Catholic schools. I mean, those would be the main priorities. that the bishops want us to work on. And so we do have a couple committees, one for education. We have a committee, a Human Life and Dignity Committee, that's mainly made up of diocesan staff from around the state. But we're not very well known, among average, rank and file Catholics. We do try to get our information out there as best we can through our website. And also we have a legislative network that people can sign up for, and they can get our reports, once a week during the session and occasionally outside of the session. So we try to, make sure Catholics know what we're about. So we really do the legislative work, and then we also encourage Catholics to get involved in the political process.
You've been really helpful to us at the diocese, well, and at the parish level too, and just reminding people to be informed and get out the vote. And here's how you can find your legislator in your area. And if you don't know that you're listening, a lot of times there's great materials they're sending out in English and in Spanish that we can push out to the parishes or push out on our own communications platforms, all coming from the Iowa Catholic Conference office and your staff. So we all are very appreciative that you're there to play that role and keep us informed. So I know Bishop was just not very long ago at the Capitol with the other bishops for legislative breakfast. And you were helpful with us as well as the Diocese of Des Moines in getting us some photos. But why don't you just give us a little taste of what it's like working with the four bishops, how you communicate with them? Do you meet as a group?
Sure. Yeah, and I really enjoy working with the bishops, have enjoyed that over the years. Mainly we communicate by email. During the legislative session, I might email them, 3 or 4 times a week, maybe more than that, just to let them know what bills are being introduced. And if there are some bills that are kind of a new thing, and ask their opinion and have them, instruct us on how they want to handle it, they want us to handle it at the Capitol. Most of the things, to be honest, we've dealt with before. Some of these, the church's positions really don't change a whole lot, as you can understand.
Mm-hmm.
We work for the same things. So many of the same things we don't have to have a lot of discussion on, but there are always new things that come up. So I email them regularly. Sometimes there are phone calls or Zoom meetings. Obviously, they get together without me several times a year, but I get together with them maybe 3 or 4 times a year. We have board meetings, and also we have a legislative breakfast at the Capitol that we do annually. And Bishop Nicholas and the other bishops were here this past week, to meet with the legislators at a breakfast. And then actually we had some meetings with the legislative leaders, that we can try to talk with them about what we're interested in. And those meetings are actually really important for me, and I appreciate the bishops make the effort to do it, because I want the legislators to understand that things I'm talking about, they're not really coming from me, they're coming from the church, and they're coming from the bishops. Mm-hmm. So that's really an important thing. And so the bishops know where to reach me when they want to talk to me about other things, but it's definitely been a good working relationship over the years.
One thing that I kind of find fascinating now that I'm in this role with the church is when you and the bishops work together and decide we need to come out with a statement on whatever the issue being. I'm thinking the last one was in regard to immigrant rights and human dignity. So can you, just from my own fascination, tell me a little bit about how that happens sometimes?
Yeah, and the statements come through in different ways. Sometimes they're generated by the bishops themselves. The idea for it is like, we really want to speak out on this. Sometimes they will hear from me or others saying, hey, have you considered doing a statement on this issue? We're not one of those groups that's putting out a news release every day and every week, but we try to save our efforts for something that's really important. And actually, I find it interesting that if you look at our website and look at the statements from done over the years, the great majority of them, I think, have been done on immigration more than anything else. That has been a consistent concern of the Catholic bishops of Iowa for decades. And so, we do put out statements on education and pro-life and some other things over the years, but I would say mostly it's been on the immigration issue and their concerns for vulnerable people.
And that's definitely been a topic in the news recently. We do a lot of articles on that as well, and the statements from the bishop are very helpful to help people understand where the church is coming from in regards to immigration. So you had mentioned briefly about your work at the Capitol and working with legislators and their staff members. Can you give us a little glimpse into your day with that and what that's like?
Yeah, I think most of my days, I'll get there relatively early in the morning, somewhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock or whatever, and start to go through the bills that were introduced the day before. So I kind of want to see what the full picture was of the bills that were introduced the day before and see how we might start to approach those. If you're going to lobby on an issue at the Capitol, if you're like an official registered lobbyist, we're responsible to register our public position on the bill. So that's part of the reason I go through all the bills and really at least read the title of everything. I don't read them all, but a good number of them I do. And then we register if we're for the bill or against the bill, or if we're undecided, which basically means you're just kind of monitoring it, or you might have a little problem with it, or you kind of like it, but it's not perhaps the top priority, or if it's something that you're just trying to fix. But you have to register publicly your position on that. So first thing in the morning is usually when I'm looking at the bills. And then once they gavel in, often there's subcommittee meetings early in the morning. Subcommittees are really the only time the public can speak publicly about the bill. So subcommittees are made up of 3 members, 2 of the majority party, 1 of the minority party, and they can be very informal, just standing around a table at the legislature, and everybody that's interested in that bill shows up, and there might be 3 people, there might be 30 people, and you just really have kind of your elevator speech of just 30 seconds to a minute of why you like the bill or don't like the bill, or what your position is on the bill. So I spend a lot of time, this time of year, particularly before the first deadline, I'm spending a lot of my time in subcommittee hearings, talking about our positions on the bill. Then there are full committee meetings where the committees meet to consider certain bills. The public cannot speak at those. You can watch them online. I can go in there and watch them. And if we're really interested in a bill, I typically will attend the committee meeting so I can hear how the debate in the committee went. So that's something that we do. And really our goal a lot of times after a subcommittee hearing is to work with committee members and try to get a bill, to advance or try to kill it, and try to do the lobbying, the personal lobbying on that. Once a bill comes out of committee, then it's much more likely we might do a broader action alert to let people know, hey, this good bill is out of committee, or hey, this bad bill is out of committee, and we encourage you to speak to your legislator about it and send an email or call or whatever works for you. So that's how my days go. Earlier in the session, lots of subcommittee meetings and committee hearings, things like that. And then as the session goes on, there starts to be floor debate. And so if we're really interested in a bill, we're for or against a bill, typically I will be at the Capitol for the debate and be available to our friends on either side of the issue to try to give them information if they need it during the debate. And part of what we do is we try to talk to them ahead of the debate and just make sure we do some preparation with them so they might be ready for the questions that come up from other legislators. So we do a lot of that kind of work as the session moves forward. And because at the Iowa legislature, it's different. Every legislature is different. Like in North Dakota, it's interesting. They basically have a floor debate on every bill.
Wow.
Committees recommend things, but every bill goes to the floor, which oh my gosh, I hope that never happens here. There's nowhere to hide on that stuff, But anyway, in Iowa, once a bill gets to the floor for debate, it's going to pass 99% of the time. I've seen it maybe happens once a year or once every other year that a bill goes to the floor for debate and it loses because somebody changed their mind or something happened during debate and they pull it off the floor. But 99.9% of the time, if a bill is being debated on the floor, it's going to pass. So at that point, it's all about the talking points and, where it goes from there.
Remind me when the session opened this year.
Yeah, it opened on January 13th.
13th, okay.
And so that's a Monday, and it's scheduled to go the first, every General Assembly is 2 years. And the first session of the General Assembly, like this year, 2025, they get paid for 110 days. Mm-hmm. So that tends to be the target date for the end of the session. So this year, the target date is in the first couple days of May to wrap up. In the second session, I would say, because it's an election year coming up, 2026, they get paid for 100 days. So those sessions tend to end in mid-April, but I've seen sessions that have gone as long as June 30th and as short as March 30th. So it just depends, but I would say, early May is a pretty solid target date for this year.
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting that you get to experience, the public discourse, play out through the processes in our government. And I would think that one of the perks of your job is getting to spend so much time in the Capitol. It's such a beautiful building. I remember the first time I went there on a field trip, and that gold dome is just so eye-catching. So it's just a great place to spend your days with that.
It's a beautiful environment. Now, some days I'm not so excited
yes.
to be there.
I would imagine.
Certain things happen under the dome that make no sense anywhere else, actually. It's only legislative logic, that would make sense. But it is a beautiful building, and it honestly is a gift to be able to spend time in it. I think it's one of the best in the country, if not the best. And I always think about what kind of a statement was that by the people of Iowa to build this building in the 1870s and the 1880s. You could not possibly have enough money to build that building today the way it is. I don't know how they did it, but I think it was clearly a statement is that, we're Iowa and we're here to stay.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that. Just Iowans have always taken pride in our state, and I think that is such a great representation of that. Looking at this current legislative session, what are some current bills that are, that you're working on specifically, or that, it's helpful for us to be aware of?
Yeah, it's been interesting in the sense that I would say this is kind of the lowest energy session that we've seen in quite a while.
Oh, interesting.
And I welcome that. so often, the last few years, we've been really, hot. Right out of the box with, like, last year was AEA in school, then it was education savings accounts or abortion constitutional amendment, some things that were really big right out of the gate. This year has not been like that. In fact, we've been kind of waiting for some of the bills that we're looking for to support to be introduced. And this week, actually, a couple things just popped up that we're very interested in. One was a bill that we've worked on the past couple of years that would provide additional conscience protections for medical professionals. That got introduced. And then also a bill that was introduced, which would have to do with credits for people on probation. They could get off probation sooner if they're working on their education or they're employed. And so those things, we want to get people back into the community if it's safe. So we're very excited to see those two bills. We've been working on some other bills that have to do with preschool funding, and we spoke to a lot of legislators last year about that. Haven't really seen anything yet because they're waiting for the governor's proposal to come out. And I do expect to see that in the next week or so, and we'll just have to see. We were looking at two things in that. One was preschool funding in general. Secondly, it was the ability of community providers like Catholic preschools to participate with districts. Some districts have not been very good to work with, and they've kicked out the Catholic preschools. So we're trying to, deal with that issue as well. We're also hoping to see, some bills on that would address the black market for abortion pills in some way. They're so easy to order online for like $25, and we'd like to address that as well, but we haven't seen the legislation yet.
It's so interesting, as you speak, I'm just reminded of the diversity in the churches interaction in the world. So many times we think of, just the pro-life issues or just the schools or, but it's really great to see that, the church's teaching and the way that we live that out in the world is so representative in such a variety of areas. So I just appreciate so much your work that, as I said before, just often goes unseen. And I think that's just so important. Looking at all of, your years of experience here, what was the most interesting legislation that you ever followed or worked on or even helped pass?
That's a really good question. That is a really good question and interesting. There's lots of interesting things that come up that seem interesting at the Capitol and nowhere else. But as I think about it, one thing that was interesting, going back to the whole discussion about education savings accounts, we started working for that in 2012. And there were so many different configurations over the years by geography or income, or if you went to a failing school, or it just looked different many, many times over the years. But in the end, it ended up right where it began, which is making it available to everyone. So I found that interesting. And I think it's instructive that there's something to be said for persistence at the legislature. And I've seen this many times on different issues, is the people who are just doggedly persistent on something very often get what they're looking for. I think of what some of the midwives worked on. They worked on a bill for over 20 years, which finally came to pass, I think, last year or the year before. Wow. And so I think it's instructive for people is, you don't want to give up on your legislators when there's something that you think is really important.
Oh, that's great.
So how would the average Catholic stay informed on all these issues that you do such a great job of staying on top of? How would the average Catholic in pew, maybe somebody listening right now, and you kind of referenced it earlier in our interview, what's your recommendation for people staying informed?
Well, I think there's a couple good ways. One is people should definitely get plugged into their diocese, in whichever way that looks like. I mean, Lumen Notes obviously are a great way to get people plugged in, and read your diocesan newspaper if you have one on paper yet. I'm an old news. I used to edit the diocesan paper, so I like the idea of paper. I got to admit it, but I understand times change. But I would definitely, number one, plug into your parish and diocese. And then number two, visit our website at iowacatholicconference.org. And there's a little button in the upper right where it says take action or sign up. And if you click on that, it takes you to our action center. And then you're able to see whatever action alerts on bills that we do have at the moment. But you're also able to put in your email address and street address, and you'll get information from us on a regular basis. And I would say that's the easiest way to stay informed. And actually, you might not agree with everything you see in our newsletters. People often in the Catholic world agree on the principle, but not on the application. Mm-hmm. So that's okay, but read what's out there and then figure out how to take action. The other thing I would say about that in that action center is even if you don't want to sign up for our emails, you can still put in your address and find out all your federal and state officials. And you can email them directly about anything you want. And for the federal officials, you'll find their staff members, and all of that information is all available through our website if you click on the Take Action button. And I think that's a great way. If you're saying you've heard something that, Senator Ernst or Senator Grassley said or whatever, who do I talk to? You can find out what staff people, work on what issues. You can directly email them through our system. And so I encourage people to do that. I think that's the easiest way to stay plugged in.
That's a great resource. We'll create a link in our show notes so that listeners can go back to that and just click on it and get to your site, because there's a lot of great information there. And may sound like a stupid question, but now why do Catholics need to stay informed? Why should they stay informed on issues? Well,
big picture, we are asked to love God and love our neighbor. I mean, those are the two big things that we're supposed to do. Scripture is crystal clear about that. And one way that we can love our neighbor is to get involved in what's going on in our society. And so some people say, it's religion and politics, and politics is kind of gross, and I don't want to get involved in that. And I don't blame people, because I have those feelings sometimes, but it's critical that we pay attention to what our legislators and members of Congress are doing, both here domestically and worldwide. And so we have a responsibility, and certainly the bishops in their documents have said, we have a moral responsibility to do that. And so I encourage people to stay involved. I get to talk about religion and politics every day. I'm not super popular at dinner parties and things like that, but Thanksgiving or whatever. But I mean, that's my job, and I enjoy doing it because I think the Catholic Church has something that society needs to hear. And I've thought that for a long time. A lot of the things that we suffer from in our society would be a lot better if people actually listen to what the church is talking about and how we should treat other people and what makes sense to help vulnerable people.
Amen.
And so, I love that. I mean, I love that part of my job, getting to talk to people about that all the time. One thing I should mention too is, just so people know, we do not get involved in funding campaigns or supporting political parties or opposing political parties. The church has nothing to do with that. We just work on issues, and sometimes it looks like, well, you're aligned with the Republicans or you're aligned with the Democrats. And the way I look at it is they're aligned with us, on those particular issues. We work on our issues and we try to get people on board with us. And we appreciate support wherever it comes from, in the Democrats and Republicans. So, we don't get involved in the partisan stuff. We work on the issues. And I think it's an easy way for people to start to find out what's going on and what's really important, in our society in Iowa and also at the national level.
I think it's so great that you say that, because it is important for Catholics to remember that we are working from the principles that they can find in the Catechism, which is available online, and the sections that talk about the social issues and how we should love our neighbor, and that that concrete way in a community they're pretty accessible if you want to read that section of the Catechism and go back to the foundation of what we're trying to bring light into the world.
Ultimately, the bishops are telling people you have to follow your well-informed conscience. Understand what the faith is calling you to do, but then ultimately it's going to be your decision, because, when we meet our Maker at the end of our days, we're going to have to answer for ourselves. It doesn't help if you say, well, Bishop Nicholas said this or Tom Chapman said this. You're going to have to be responsible for yourself. And if you have a good reason for believing that what you do and what you worked on, the bishops will support you in that. We need to inform ourselves and know what we're talking about and then go get involved. And we're happy to have those discussions with people all over the place.
And we appreciate your willingness to visit with the media, including us. So that's always helpful, so that we can break down an issue and actually get the facts, because we know you have them.
Yep. Always happy to do that. We've got issues, that's for sure.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today. It's just always fascinating to have that, a little bit behind the scenes look as to what your work is and what, our bishops do. Oftentimes people are not aware that our bishops are involved in this, part of our public life.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate the opportunity to get the word out. So thank you very much.
Yep. And, Tom mentioned so many resources that are available on their website. So we would encourage you to visit those as well, and just continue to do your best to learn what the church teaches and take that to prayer and just be an informed voter. So thank you for those who are listening, for those who are following Illuminating Catholics. Don't miss a single podcast as we continue to have a great lineup of guests, a great variety of guests in the coming week. We just are always thrilled that you can join us, because there is always something to learn about the faith.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church. Follow us for more episodes on topics of the Catholic faith. For more diocesan news, visit lumenmedia.org.